I think that is all the ground rules. So I will jump into this Network Now project. So kind of what is Network Now? Network Now is setting the course for the next 5 years. It's looking at our overall level of service, making priorities and creating scenarios as we have resources to put more buses out on the streets. So we also have projects that'll be coming online within those 5 years, and it's thinking about how best to use our resources to meet the needs of our customers. Our first step is really to make a decision-making framework, both recognizing our opportunities to grow, but constraints as well. Right now, we are conducting a regional discussion on values for our transit principles that will really help us set the course for the overall project. And tonight, we'll be telling more about our story of adaptability and resilience, kind of over the pandemic and post-pandemic. We'll also begin to identify plans to improve transit service through 2027 as part of this project. Overall, there's 4 phases. We right now are in the first phase where we are engaging on values and principles. I think for the new person, if we can, Eric or Yumi, if you wouldn't mind muting them. Thank you. There'll be time to unmute later. And then for the next step will be to confirm our network of today. So really deciding what buses are on the street, how that works, and that'll give us a baseline to move forward and propose how we adapt our service. And then all of that, all the engagement and feedback that we get for those 2 phases will culminate in a recommended plan in spring of next year. So fast project, and we'll be using the information kind of as we go as well. So kind of what is included? We could be making changes to existing route services. We could be creating new or redesigning routes. We're talking about the frequency, so how often the bus comes and span, how long it runs of our existing planned metro lines. We'll think about service that might need to be discontinued or facilities that might close as they don't serve our riders as much anymore. We'll also be thinking about what other actions we can take to make our buses more speedy and reliable. We all, as folks know, we have a series of planned metro lines, kind of like think the B line, Gold line, whatnot. This project won't change when they open, nor will we be identifying new projects that could improve transit service. We've gotten questions if this project addresses fares, and that will have to be addressed in other ways. Also want to just kind of note this project is for now. It will be implemented as it gets complete. So you're really giving us feedback for how we plan service today and over the next 5 years. We will exchange notes with our longer range planners, those that are developing plans, for 10, 20, 30 years in the future, but this is very much an operational plan. So let me talk a little bit about what has changed since March of 2020. Probably a month and a date that all of you will remember quite well for the rest of our lives. In that month, we started the response to COVID, and the state issued guidelines about what we needed to do. And a big thing for Metro Transit was providing essential trips only and really prioritizing service for people that really needed transit. For the first time ever, we said, if you don't need to ride with us, don't. I mean, that's a big thing, right? Think about a business being like, don't come, right? It was a big disruptor to our transit service. So there's multiple phases of how we kind of dealt with COVID. Initially suspending quite a bit of service and limiting the amount of riders that could be on board to about 25% of capacity. So really thinking about the buses that were moving a lot of folks and prioritizing resources that way. People were also boarding through the back door. We weren't collecting fares. As we moved kind of through the year, some of life kind of got back to normal and we tried to restore some service. And eventually the governor's peacetime emergency ended. But we came to a new problem, which was workforce shortages. Between the disruption of the pandemic and retirements, we were in need of bus operators. And there are 2 lines on this graphic. One is our needed amount of operators. The budgeted amount is actually quite a bit more, but we need these many operators to keep service on the street. And then the red line is how many we actually had at a point in time. And any time that those lines are not in alignment, we start missing service. So trips, when the yellow line is higher than the red line, trips are missed. And one of the things that we've heard pretty consistently, and I think are kind of confirming through this project as well, is people rather have less service and know their bus is coming than the other way. If you think differently, let us know. But so far, that's what we've been hearing through this phase as well. So we set out another set of reductions based solely on our workforce. And these were a lot of cuts basically from fall of 2021, and especially as you got into fall of 2022, that we did not want to make. These were hard decisions that a lot of us felt very deeply about, and look forward to hopefully restoring many of those cuts. We also opened a couple metro lines during that time. They were already in planning, so it didn't make sense to hold their opening, and especially for the D line, we were repurposing a lot of the resources that we already had. Kind of how we make those decisions, we're influenced by technical data and by policy, and something that's called a transit market area is part of that guidance. The transit market areas are designed to tell you, in this area, you might get a lot of ridership. So the bar graph on the right just kind of shows proportionally how much service is in each market area. It helps you guide where transit might be the most successful. We had a series of guiding principles that we brought to the table. And in a lot of ways, we're asking you about these in our survey and through the games that we are playing, the interactive activities. So how important is it for our service to be reliable? Do customers have alternative? What does that mean? Overall, trying to minimize ridership loss and really thinking of impact. So minimizing impacts to low-income and communities of color, and overall thinking of the balance of our network. So from all of those changes, since basically the beginning of 2020, this is our network of today. We still carry about 39 million total riders a year and have a lot of folks getting on board with us every day. Kind of from our buses are definitely our workhorses, but we have a ton of folks on our LRT and our BRT as well. If you look on the right side of the screen, you have our total number of routes, and you can kind of see the breakout of which ones are active in white and the ones that are currently suspended in blue. As part of this project, we'll be deciding if some of these are going to come back in the near term, or if they might be officially discontinued and brought back at a future time, or never brought back at all. All things that we need to consider. So we constrained or took away service as ridership was starting to come back. So just kind of want to acknowledge that. And the world was changing in the meantime in terms of folks not using our park and rides as much, folks turning to telecommuting and other kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk next about kind of what we've seen overall about our ridership. And just quickly, this is also kind of where our service is compared to 2019 in terms of type. So local bus, where kind of runs all day versus the commuter express, which is kind of peak AM PM, and our BRT, which is bus rapid transit, that grew because we opened our orange lines and our D line during that time. So a couple things from that time. Overall, all of our riders have been impacted by cuts, but BIPOC and low-income riders have been impacted less so. So we've retained service in the areas that serve those demographics the most. The amount of service in the suburbs has dropped, and so has our core, but there has been places in kind of the core area of our area where we have been able to increase service. And this will be something that we'll be looking at as we balance the needs of the project going forward. Overall, ridership dropped significantly, but is growing steadily again, and kind of see these upward trends in all of our services. Commuter and express kind of tailing behind a little bit, but steady growth overall. When people ride throughout the day has also changed. The gray is the kind of pre-COVID, and the black lines is post, I guess the pandemic never really ends, but post the emergency response to the pandemic. And what we're seeing is those folks, a bunch of folks getting on the bus to go to work in the morning and coming home in the afternoon has shifted. Instead, we see people riding kind of throughout the day, and kind of those social trips or those later hour trips are also a greater place that people are riding. When you kind of look at our ridership trends and you look at this chart, there are services that provide that run all day and provide people the ability to make multiple trips. So maybe you go drop your kid off at daycare and then you go to work and then you need to go to an appointment during lunch and then you do something else. Those trips types have been the most resilient because people are living lives more flexibly. We've also found that people are riding differently days of the week. That has been true kind of throughout, but in some of our services, that's even more pronounced than it was before. So our local, not as much variation, but particularly those services that are commuter and express, there's been great variation. Tuesday is a popular day where Fridays and Mondays are a lot less folks. These two graphs are at different scales, but it kind of shows you proportionately how people travel throughout the week. We also know that commuter routes have changed significantly. There's definitely a greater role of telecommuting in certain jobs, and parking costs in a lot of our downtowns are a lot less because there's less people going into them day to day. So people have other alternatives. Commuters tend to be a smaller share of our overall transit riders, as shown by the graph before. So we have because of that, in the routes that we have suspended, we have a bunch of stops and facilities that aren't currently receiving the same amount of service. So this chart shows kind of what is in use, what is available, and you can see kind of the big dropping off of people parking at our parking facilities. That's something that we need to address throughout this project, as well as if we have bus stops where people, kind of like the sign shows that there's not service currently at that location, how we deal with that. Okay, so now we get more to the fun part. We hit you with a bunch of data, and now we want to hear from you. So I'm going to transition us to the next activity. Before I do that, I just want to do a quick plug for the public survey. So if you haven't had a chance to take the survey yet, please do so and encourage your friends to do that. But I'm going to quickly swap my screens and pull up our interactive activity. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, folks, this QR code can be scanned to get to our interactive activity, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code. And I'll just give a few minutes for folks to start to do that. And you can do the thumbs up when you join if you want. I'll also just put this in the chat quick so you have the link. Sorry, it's gonna be kind of big. I think Eric's doing it too. Those are very big numbers because I copied from here And not everybody might want to do this activity. That is totally cool. I'm going to give it one more minute because we only have a small portion of the meeting joining so far. Okie dokie. I'll go on to the next slide. So in this first activity, you are going to be cutting 2 trips. And let me explain a little bit about what you're looking at in terms of the metrics on the screen. So there are 10 trips, A through J, and we give you kind of 4 different types of information about each. The service type, how much ridership the line has, the average income of the rider. So not how much we make on the service, but how much of the person, the demographics of the people traveling with us have. And then the number of trips per hour, so how often the bus comes. There are basically 5 different types that we talk about. So there's the commuter express, which is shown in options I and J, and that's service that typically runs between the suburbs and runs, that AM PM type scenario. And then there's bus rapid transit, which is our kind of premium service. So, off-board fare payment, great amenities. We look into making the bus run as quickly as possible. Typically can run both in our urban and suburban areas. We have our core local, which is kind of the main amount of service that we run. And so the core local serves Minneapolis and St. Paul and kind of the surrounding suburbs and runs all day. And then we have the suburban local, which is similar, but runs between the suburbs. So it travels within the suburbs.